Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the most depraved thing you've ever seen? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A colleague and I were first on the scene of a fatal hit-and-run in Manchester a few weeks ago. While we were trying to give the victim first aid, or more accurately, panicking, knowing our first aid ability was completely inadequate, a lady stood by us, filming everything on her phone. I'm still completely traumatized by it, and all I can think of is this absolute see you next Tuesday filming while a 22-year-old girl lay dying in the road. I saw a group of guys knock on someone's door and then shoot the guy who answered. I was about 15 feet away, getting into my car after finishing a babysitting job. My basketball teammates in middle school were all carpooling together, and on the way back from a game, we came to a stoplight. The parent driving suddenly yelled not to look out to the left of the car. Naturally, all of us middle school boys promptly looked exactly there, only to find a butt-naked man on the side of the road, aggressively shoving a large spoon in and out of their butthole. 'Twas a quiet ride home after that, and a sight deeply seared into my mind, even over 10 years later. I was a teenager running a $5,000 fundraiser. Before it even started, I noticed a guy who was dressed unusually. He was wearing one of those tight fishnet shirts from the 80s and black short shorts. He looked like a discount Rocky Balboa. As the race commenced, he started making sounds like he was struggling almost immediately, like the tail end of a marathon sound. My group was right behind him, and I was keeping an eye out because I'm intrigued. I noticed that his inner thighs are unusually hairy. Then I noticed that they seem to be getting hairier. Then the grunting noises get more intense. Then the smell starts to spread, and then everyone nearby notices. The dude ran the entire 3-ish miles with poopy pants, and then sticks around like nothing is wrong. He's grabbing bottles of water and leaning against wooden fences at the park, leaving shitty-ass prints in multiple spots. Finding an old lady tries to help, telling him he should go home and giving him her jacket to wrap around his waist. He acted oblivious. To this day, I wonder what that was. Mental illness? A public humiliation fetish? I'm leading towards a combination of the two. I used to work at a small grocery store in a town that had a decently sized concert venue or campground. Needless to say, every summer was a constant parade of drunk girls in bikini tops, weed whores, and people who lost their shoes in the river. The following story was witnessed after the fact on the security tapes. One night as me and my manager were in the back room closing up, only 2 employees locked up at night, a guy managed to jimmy open the locked front door. He completely failed to find the restroom he was looking for 15 feet to the left, despite the clear signage, and proceeded to the produce section. There, he climbed aboard a cart-shaped display full of iceberg lettuce, thanked the cart from "my cabbages," took off his pants, threw them on the floor, and took a shit on the lettuce. When he was done, he reclaimed his trousers and walked right back out the door. When the manager and I did our final walkthrough 5 minutes later, we smelled his deposit long before we found it. After checking the tape, we notified the store manager that we'd be staying late to clean it up and rebuild the lettuce display. The next day, the store manager gave both of us $100 and had upgraded door locks installed. A spoiled childhood friend had a gas-powered RC car. He thought it would be funny to duct tape a lizard onto it and take the poor thing for a ride. When he tried to take the tape off, it basically ripped the dude in half, and the kid laughed. Fast forward some years, and he went away for murder. I used to work at a magazine store, just a normal one, which also had an adult-only section. I haven't seen a magazine in years, but in those days, it used to have a plastic cover that would hide the entire magazine apart from the name of the magazine. One day as I was walking around the store, I saw one smartly dressed gentleman licking the cover of a magazine. He was really going at it. The magazine was still in its plastic cover, and all you could see was the brand name. I worked at a nicer Mexican restaurant where we served these giant football-sized burritos. This one guy on his 21st birthday ate the whole thing and puked it back up onto the plate. The table started to chant, "Eat it, eat it." So we did. Ugh. And the dude next to him helped. Ugh. Just a couple of bites, but damn. Circa 2002. I went to pick my girlfriend up from work. She worked at a facility that helped mentally disabled adults who were wards of the state do daily activities and find part-time jobs, some even full-time. I go to the house where she worked and where many of the individuals she helped manage live. One of these individuals, we'll call her Gail, was a short, round woman pushing 50 years of age. Gail was always smiling like she was in on some joke no one else was, and this was the day I found out why. As my girlfriend and I were saying goodbye to my girlfriend's boss, Gail triumphantly marched out of the bathroom with a forearm-sized turd in her hand, smiling proudly, and said loudly, "You want to see the shit hit the fan?" as she throws it upwards, underhand, into the living room ceiling fan, which was on high, and Gail's turd was plastered around the room and all of us. I still get sick thinking about the smell. My God. Well, if Gail waited her whole life for that inside joke, gross and disgusting that it was, as a reader and not a witness, that's pretty funny. So, I did laugh. A drunk guy at a party claimed he could drink anything and that if everyone spits in a cup, I could even drink that. Ugh. Someone took him up on that, and we went around the party with a cup, gathering spit, foam from beers, and cigarette butts. One guy peed a little bit in it. The drunk guy did drink it. Then he puked everywhere shortly after. I got a fun one for you. My younger sister and I went out to eat at a diner. Towards the end of the meal, she told me that she had to use the bathroom. She was gone for a longer time than usual. She finally came back and we finished eating, which wasn't very long. I paid for the food and told her that I had to use the bathroom before we left. I went into the women's bathroom, opened the door to the first stall. There was shit smeared everywhere, all over the walls and the toilet. Shit-covered paper was also everywhere. I was absolutely appalled and disgusted. It looked like a kid went to town and finger-painted with shit. I left the bathroom and told my sister about it. She was also shocked and disgusted by it. I found out years later that she was the one who did it. I no longer have anything to do with her, not because of the poop painting incident, but because of a myriad asshole behaviors, including stealing my identity and going on a shopping spree. My son got stabbed in April. His intestines were outside his abdomen. The guy was trying to steal stuff from a cars at a club, and my kid was just chilling outside when he saw the guy and asked him to stop looking in the cars. The perp is a career criminal. He was out on bail before my kid was out of the ICU. He had previously been charged with murder, burglary, assault, and a bunch of other stuff. There was zero reason for that dude to stab my kid. Zero. I was skating at a park in downtown LA when a drug deal went bad and one guy shot two guys dead. The park that had hundreds of people on this particular day emptied. After about a minute, the people returned and began stripping the bodies of the men that were there, dying of their clothes and necklaces. By the time the cops got there, they were in their boxers and wife-beater shirts, and that's it. I work in a big box store. One morning, I went into the real restroom, 2 sets of restrooms in the building, one in the front and one in the back, to find a guy probably on medication sitting in a urinal. He immediately starts yelling that he needs the manager, and that he needs to take a shit, but only the urinals are available. He ignored the fact that one stall beside the urinal he was sitting in was standing completely open. Yeah, that was a fun morning. I saw a threesome in the front yard of a house party. All 3 were maybe 18 to 19 and super high on ecstasy. There were probably 10 other people standing around, filming or taking pictures, heckling and throwing stuff at them. Later that night, they had sobered up a bit and came inside. It looked like one of the guys had effed a tiger. His back had massive scratch marks and was just freely flowing blood. Before the threesome, the girl was inside the house, pants down, flicking her bean in the middle of the party, absolutely out of her mind on ecstasy, and jawing like mad. That's probably 20 years ago, but that's a memory I'll never forget. My former boss was very wealthy, but his best friend, let's call him Ralph, was a big-time moocher. No one liked our best friend because he took advantage of our boss. One time, the entire back office went to a high-end sushi restaurant, and Ralph happened to glom on. Our boss picked up the tab, but simply asked that we all chip in for the tip, which we all did in cash. What we later discovered was that the tip was very light. Ralph went back into the restaurant for his sunglasses and stole $200 cash from the tip on the table. He denied it, but everyone knew it was true. Real scumbag, stealing from the waitress who claimed didn't really need the money. My uncle and his wife, who my granddad despised, stole my granddad's cigarettes from his pocket while he was dying in the bed he slept in. Everyone, including him, basically knew he wasn't going to make it through the night. When he woke, he just wanted a cigarette, but the nurse explained to everyone how his son had taken them. My mother went in search of a cigarette for him, but by the time she got back, he had died. He had smoked his entire life and just wanted the last one before he passed. I was a retail manager a while ago. We started getting emails about a guy who was going into the men's bathrooms and vomiting all over them. The amount of vomit was so large that they had to call the company to clean it up each time it happened, always in different locations. Well, the day came, and he finally hit my store, and holy shit, I've never seen anything like it. I'll never get that image out of my head. Wall to wall, you could make out the shape of the toilet, but literally couldn't see any porcelain. I pulled up the cameras because I was sure he had made a fake vomit cocktail or something, though the smell should have been enough confirmation for me. Nope. Tiny little dude strolls in, no backpack or anything, goes straight to the bathroom, and then out he goes. The weirdest way I've ever heard of someone spending their free time. I worked security at a nightclub in the late 90s. It was a multi-tiered spot with a concert venue and nightclub that sometimes had wildly different crowds. The night this story happened was an 80s themed night in the club and a punk rock show in the venue. I get called to the women's bathroom in the club part, which is never a good thing. There's a girl in there who passed out on the toilet, spit and puke all over herself, so I have to carry her out. I get her to the back staircase and sit her down. She's babbling, but nothing I can understand. After a short time, this guy comes outside, claims to be her boyfriend and wants to take her home. She says she drank too much. Girl's a pretty young white girl. Dude is a fat, mid-30s, Middle Eastern looking guy. Something was off. We were trying to find her ID, but her pants are still tangled up. Her keys fell out, and one of the other bouncers picked them up. The guy immediately tries to claim them, saying they're from his car. My coworker asks him what kind of car it is. Before he can answer, another girl starts screaming behind us, "Holy shit, what happened?" I start to tell her what has happened to her friend, and that the boyfriend is wanting to take her home. What boyfriend? The guy immediately hauls ass running down an alley away from us. We caught him, but instead of calling the police, we told some of the punks I knew that were there what he had done. They took him, kicked the shit out of him, and dropped him in a dumpster. I'm a teacher. About a decade or so ago, I had a student with severe trauma and some symptoms that I think will eventually be diagnosed as schizophrenia. His mom also had severe trauma like PTSD. A lot of teachers were afraid of the kid because he had some serious violence in the past, but if you knew the story, he was trying to defend a family member from severe domestic violence. He was among the sweetest, most genuinely good kids and people I've ever met. Anyway, some scumbags took advantage of the situation and used the fact that the family was a shit show to molest the kid. I saw the person one time at the school before we knew what had happened, and I've never gotten a feeling like I got from that guy. It was like something in my gut told me I needed to get away from him and get him away from the school. I'm really glad I've never seen him again, as I'm genuinely not sure I wouldn't send him to the hospital, which wouldn't help my former student or me at this point. I know he was arrested, but I heard they dropped the case. I had no way to follow up and find out what happened. I think about that kid often and really hope he's okay. He deserves so much better than the hand he was dealt. If you're out there, proud of you. and I hope things get better for you. I don't know if this counts. In my late teens or early 20s, a friend of mine introduced us to his new girlfriend. She was actually pretty cool and mixed well with our group. That night, they both pass out in his room, and she wakes up completely disoriented. I couldn't find her a light switch on the door, so she just dropped a deuce on the bedroom floor and crawled back into his bed. Ugh. He woke me up the next morning asking what we should do. Before we could approach her, she jumped out of the bed and ran to the bathroom. She bent down to throw up in the toilet and simultaneously sprayed the wall behind her with the most toxic smelling shit brown I've ever witnessed. Every time she heaved to throw up more, there was more back spray. After she was finished, she washed her hands, told him she had to head to work, and left. She never apologized or even mentioned it. We never ran into her again after that. He didn't date anyone for almost 2 years after that. We laugh about it now, but for the longest time, it was just a known thing that we didn't mention. It wasn't his fault, but he carried that guilt on his own for a long time. Back in college, my friend was having a party at his house, and he invited a bunch of people, including some sorority girls. One of the sorority girls got incredibly drunk, stood up on the coffee table in the living room, pulled up her skirt, and shoved the neck of a glass bottle in her vagina. She effed herself with it for several minutes in front of at least a dozen people. I went and found my friend and let him know what was happening, and he communicated it to one of her sorority sisters, who went and put a stop to it. Don't think that girl ever lived it down, as some people had taken video of it, and the video started circulating. Felt really bad for her. I was working at a grocery store during the pandemic to make ends meet, 45 minutes from a place I shared with my ex in a shit part of town. I never closed except for one night, and an hour before closing, I was told I could go home a bit early because everything was done. My ex was a selfish piece of shit for many reasons, but in our part of town, with very little parking while she was home all day, she didn't bother to move her car from our parking spot, and I had to drive around the neighborhood at 9 p.m. for blocks, looking for a spot with flowers I bought for her in my passenger seat. I'm driving down a main street, approaching an intersection, when I see people at a bus stop in the distance. One person is limp while the other two carry them, so I thought, drunk. I got to the light to make a left into another neighborhood while still looking for parking, and while I turned, I noticed it was two men holding up a woman who they'd undressed and began R-ing while unconscious. I immediately called the police to report it, and once I hung up less than a minute later, I started screaming and pounding on my steering wheel out of frustration. I knew I couldn't wait. I knew they were going to take her somewhere darker, and who knows what would happen when they got her there. I flipped around to go back to the corner, and sure enough, they were gone. I turned down the closest street to look for them. The street lights were either busted or weak, so everything was dark, but I found them. One holding her up while the other R-ed her. I lived in a violent, gang-heavy area. People being murdered was a regularity. I'm not a big guy, nor was I armed. I knew trying to engage would just get me killed. So instead, I pulled up on them, tires screeching, high beams on, music blasting with windows down, and I just started screaming at them, calling them pussycats, bitches, flipping them off, anything I could think of to piss them off and get them to turn their attention on me. They drop her and start toward me. Seconds later, the police pull up and are able to arrest both men, as well as a third who was watching from the bushes, waiting for his turn, as the detective put it. What bugs me the most is that I was one of two people who called the police and the only person who tried to do anything to stop it. And when I testified, my ex called me selfish for putting her life in danger to be a white knight. Oh, and then I had to find parking after looking for 30 minutes and then walk blocks with my adrenaline up, holding a bouquet of flowers for this asshole. About 8 years ago, I was working as a train conductor and my locomotive engineer and I hit a young woman with an 8,000-ton freight train traveling 40 miles an hour. After applying the emergency brakes, it was my job to get out and visually check to see if we indeed had an accident. I found her contorted body in seemingly impossible ways near the side of the tracks. I radioed 911 to my dispatcher, and emergency services were immediately called. Unfortunately, she passed away not long after the ambulance arrived. Last year I worked for a very small company that wasn't doing well, and then our salesman came down with aggressive cancer. The company went out of business 6 weeks later, and though no one can prove it, every single person suspects that the owner would have cut losses and received a tax write-off and a personal payout, then try to pay for my coworkers' medical bills. Once I went to a village with my friend. Basically, in my country, some villages don't actually follow the laws of government. They handle them on their own, and the villages had their own committee of laws and decision makers and villagers' choice. They caught an artist R-ing a girl in a wheat farm. They tied him to a tree, and all the men in the village gathered to see his punishment. A guy came with a machete and chopped the artist's dick and balls in one strike. He was screaming, and they fed his parts to fish in the river. He remained alive in the end, and it's been 4 years since I saw this.